Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today it's all about how to build a winning CV or resume. So we'll be discussing the top tips and tricks I've learned over my past few years to make your CV stand out amongst the rest when you're applying for jobs. So before we start, it's really important to pre-plan your CV. What this means is to make sure you have a structure in place before you start writing it, to make sure you're really including the most relevant and important information. Then it comes to the most crucial and important next step, which is to build and write the CV. So often today, many people are confused on where to start, what's the best structure. So what I've done instead is make your life a little bit easier, and I've actually made a template for you all to enjoy and download via the description box below. And it looks something like this. So in terms of the structure, you always want to start your CV with your full name in capital letters and in bold, and then underneath it, have a bit of your personal and relevant information that you want the interviewer to have. For example, it could be a phone number, an email address, or even a website. And then you want to have a section, which I like to call personal profile. Here it can be a couple of sentences explaining a bit about you that perhaps is not depicted through your education experience or your employment history, but makes you stand out a little bit more. Or if you want, you can make it a bit more visual and have key achievements to make those stand out and more easily to digest. Once you've done the personal profile, you then want to start with your experience and especially with your employment history. If you've just graduated and you don't have any experience, perhaps you want to use your internships here, or if not, just go straight into your education. It's important for your experience and your employment history to include a few sentences beneath the last few relevant jobs. That's sort of like a job description to include the highlights of the job, what your tasks involved, and the key expertise that was needed. It's also relevant to include languages that you know, and you want to make sure you also say at what level, if you're novice, beginner, intermediate, because this will really make you stand out, and also for global roles can be very, very useful. You then want to have at the end of the CV a section on your skill sets and especially your proficiencies. For example, are you proficient in Microsoft Office, Photoshop? So those are just the basics on how to structure your CV, and you can use my template, which has got it all outlined for you to make it a lot more easier to do. And if you've already made your CV, perhaps you can incorporate some of these to amend and adapt to just improve it a little bit better. As much as it's important to follow these rules, it's also important to know what to avoid, because often many mistakes are made when making a CV that can be easily corrected if we're just aware of them. The first being the length. So I personally recommend to always keep your CV to one page. I've seen thousands and countless of CVs that I've actually literally narrowed them down to which are the most digestible that I can skim read, and anything that had 2 pages or more, I often only looked at the first page and never even turned it over. And that's why I recommend to keep your CV to 1 page maximum. But of course, if the job you're applying for requires you to showcase a lot more about your employment history, then 2 pages is absolutely fine. The next thing I would say to avoid is images. A lot of people put their photo on their CV, and I personally recommend to avoid this entirely. You don't want to have some prejudice before. You want to be really kind of looked at and merited for your work and not perhaps some other factors. The reason why you don't want to include a photo is because many employers might end up looking at this and deciding just based on your looks that they don't want to pursue this CV further. It's sad, but it exists today, unfortunately. So I would always recommend you leave that for the interview and instead leave your CV based on the merit of what the content is. I also, on this note, would recommend perhaps not including your date of birth, because often this can also be a barrier to entry, where age is often linked to lack of experience, where this is entirely not true. Many people, even at a young age, can have experienced far more than others, but also may have learned a lot more during their short time. So I, for example, did 13 internships before I landed my first job as a manager at 22. So those experiences definitely helped me to kind of climb up the ladder quicker and get a manager role at a much younger age. But if I was based on just my age, I probably would never be considered. So I purposely did not include my age. And often, even in one of my jobs, when I was hired, they then found out my age and were like, wow, I had no idea you were so young. So that way I really made sure that I was hired for the merit of my work and my experience and not something as superficial as just an age or number. I also would definitely recommend to avoid using repeated words or having spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, punctuation. It goes without saying, but often I've seen many CVs where there are a lot of mistakes. So perhaps having a friend, proofread it, or even just investing in tools like Grammarly.com is probably the answer. And last but not least, one of the most important things to do is always stay true to yourself and avoid faking anything on your CV, because later on in your career, it could always be found out, and that will be detrimental to your career growth. I know it's very tempting to kind of exaggerate certain things or enhance certain areas of your CV, but just try to be as true as possible. And if you're just starting out and you don't have enough things to say on your CV, you can be tactical and, word things in a smarter way that does tell the truth, but not all the details. Like, for example, let's say you're doing a 2-3 week internship and it's between mid of June to early July. Instead of saying the exact dates, just say June to July. It's still saying the truth and it sounds bigger and better, but also it can make your CV stand out a little bit extra. So there are tips and tricks that you can definitely do to make your CV look better, but do not lie and do not fake anything. It will really cost you later. And now you've written your perfect CV, you've got all the information, you know what to avoid, you know what to include. Then the other issue comes. How do I promote it and how do I get it seen? So what I like to do is always, firstly, when I go to an interview, I like to always bring a printed CV, even if they've received it by email. It's important for me to have them have it on their desk. So when they leave, they have it often to refer to and they kind of get reminded about myself as an applicant. I often try to also print this on good quality paper and something that shows the professionality of myself. I also would recommend, promoting your CV in other outlets, for example, keeping it attached to your LinkedIn profile, and also regularly updating your CV as often as possible because it's something that often will change as you grow and have more experience. Even if you're comfortable in your job, always try to amend and update your CV every year minimum. You can even go further with your CV and incorporate like QR codes to be scanned so you have more information online, which can be really useful for people who have, for example, photographers who have a portfolio to show, or people that have articles written about themselves. QR codes are definitely something to look into. So there you have it, a very short but hopefully informative way to improve your CV to make it that winning one for you to land that perfect role. Thank you so much for watching and be sure to subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and I'll see you very soon for another video. Good luck with your job applications.